Okay. Gurudev?
Yes.
Okay, I can see you and I can hear you. That's a good sign. Happy Baladeva Purnima. Do you want to share anything before you start the class or just go ahead with the class?
I think we can just go ahead with the class.
Okay, yeah.
It's nice to be with you all on this auspicious occasion. I heard that today's Purnima is a blue moon. So those are rare and auspicious, I think, from an ordinary point of view, and certainly from our point of view today, is the Balaram Purnima, Baladeva Purnima Ki Jai. It's interesting to note that all of us, for the most part, are involved in this discussion and participation, celebration of this holy day today, and involved in Gaudiya Vaishnavism because of Prabhupada's departure from India to the West, and he departed on the Baladeva Purnima from Bombay. So as the moon was rising in the east and heading west, he sailed as well and created our good fortune. So we got somewhat of a send-off from Balaram. He further, of course, requested strength while on the boat, while on the journey from Krishna, to be able to perform the kind of seva that he envisioned his Guru Maharaj Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted of him. And it seems that Krishna gave him that power. And of course, as we know from the perspective of Pujapatrita Maharaj, that was the power of Balaram or Nityananda Ram that descended in him. So again, Baladeva Purnima Ki Jai. Balaram is, of course, important to us for many reasons, but one kind of overarching reason is that he has much to do with the very tattva that we are ontologically, constituted of, tatastha shakti. It's stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahasankarshan, who's the Prakash, the expansion of Balaram in Vaikuntha, is the shelter of the entirety of the tatastha shakti. So so it means in Vaikuntha he manifests without any beginning in time, if you will. We're limited by words to describe such things. But let's say, rather than manifest, he's the shelter of Nityasiddha Tatastha Shakti Jivas, and then his avatar, which is the original avatar, Mahavishnu, the avatar of Mahasankarshan, who presides over the material world, then is the one spoken of throughout the scripture, who becomes many, as all of us, so that they have the Nityabada Tatastha Jivas. So, excuse me, as I say, this Mahasankarshan, Mahavishnu, his avatar, these are prominent manifestations of Baladeva. And then from the bhakti perspective as well, Chaitanya Charitamrita informs us that Bhakta Abhiman Mool Sri Balarame. So the Abhiman, or the ego of a devotee, mool, the root of this in everyone, including the different Vishnu expansions, avatars, and so on and so forth, is Balaram. He's the original servitor, if you will. We have the Savior Bhagavan and Sevaka Bhagavan. So he is the form of Bhagavan that personifies service to Bhagavan at the same time. It's a very interesting concept. If you could imagine, and I've said something like this previously, if you could imagine having the ability to personify your emotions and then interact with them, that would be something like what Balaram is, if you will, to Krishna, with the rise of the fraternal emotion or the feeling of friendship. So that person in Krishna, that personifies in the form of Balaram, with whom then he interacts. Balaram is his best friend, and he really embodies the fullness of friendship. We'll see that a little bit, hopefully, as we go forward and describe his nature. But that said, he's introduced to us at the very onset of the 10th canto. Not that he's not mentioned previously. Previous to the 10th canto, there's mention of Krishna and Balaram and so forth. But of course, the 10th canto marks a real ongoing step-by-step recounting on the part of Sukadeva to Parikshit Maharaj the Prakat Leela. So therein he goes into great detail about Krishna, and the point being here about Balaram. Just previous to the 10th canto, of course, there's a description of the Yadu dynasty, and Krishna and Balaram appeared in the Yadu dynasty. That previously was a bit of a point that kind of discouraged Parikshit Maharaj at first. We find in the 5th canto that he is a little bit despondent at the thought that Krishna appeared in the Yadu dynasty rather than in the Kuru dynasty, of which he's a member. But Sukadeva Goswami quickly uplifted his spirits by pointing out that yes, it's true. He took birth in the Yadu dynasty, and so they're celebrated for as a result. But comparatively, he is stated in intimacy and fraternal love with Arjuna and the Pandavas, who are of the Kuru dynasty. And so he was closer by consciousness rather than by birth with the Kurus than with the Yadus and the Yadu dynasty that he's a member of. It's a subtle way also in which the Bhagavatam, and there are a number of instances of this, it plays down the kind of forced idea that we find in some Hindu sects, especially in the Advaita sect of Vedanta, that caste by birth is such an overriding significant factor. They think something to the effect that if you're born in a Brahmin family and you happen to have Brahminical qualities, well, that's better. But if you're born in a Brahmin family and you don't have Brahminical qualities, you're still a Brahmin and should be treated as such. So same holds true with being born as a Brajabasi or being a Brajabasi in consciousness. So at any rate, Balaram, Parikshit Maharaj was encouraged by Sukadev, as he spoke about the intimacy and friendship with which, for example, Krishna interacted with Arjuna. And then here, as we come to the 10th canto, after hearing again previously in the 9th canto some kind of genealogical table of members of the Yadu dynasty and so forth, Parikshit Maharaj expresses eagerness to Sukadev that he might elaborate upon not only Krishna, but, and this is right, I mean, the second verse of the 10th canto, which makes up, the great, by far the majority of the whole text. Parikshit Maharaj says, Tatra amsena avatirnasya Vishnu. So, Tatra amsena. There's a understanding of this that outside of the Gaudiya perspective, that reads something to the effect that that Sukadev here is, or excuse me, Parikshit Maharaj, the inquirer, is asking of Sukadev to hear something more about Vishnu, who is an Amsa, or Krishna, who is an Amsa of Vishnu. But the Gaudiya rendering of the verse, which I think is grammatically certainly supportable, but more accurate, given the entirety of the Bhagavatam, which is the speciality, if you will, of the Gaudiyas. No one takes the Bhagavatam more seriously than Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So their commentaries, their perspective on it, should be taken more seriously. And of course, if we look to the Tattva Sandarbha, for example, we get the basic idea from Jiva Goswami of the importance of the Bhagavatam in relation to all the other revealed scriptures, so on and so forth. And then how to understand the Bhagavatam, as he points out, beginning with looking at the trance of Vyasa, out of which it arose, and so on and so forth. So the Gaudiya perspective then on this verse 10.2 is that Amsena, Amsa Saha, that he appeared along with his Amsa. So let me hear about Vishnu, who here is in reference to Krishna, who appears along with his Amsa. So the point being here, relative to our discussion, is that he, Parikshit Maharaj, wanted to hear about Krishna and Balaram together, the two of them. They are, in fact, an instance in which the avatar appears along with more or less a twin of himself. So we talk about the Krishna avatar, we talk about the fact that he's an avatari, but he appears as an avatar as well. But even in the descriptions of the avatars given in the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, where the famous line, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, comes at the end of the description of a good number of avatars. Just prior to that, the Krishna avatar is mentioned, and of course mentioned along with Balaram. So the Krishna and Balaram avatar. Balaram is not, for example, an avatar or expansion of Narayan, but the immediate expansion of Krishna in Braj, for which, if you will, adds to the very, if you will, the very friendly nature of that domain, Ahobhagyam, as Brahman said, Nanda Gopa Vrajokasam, Yon Mitram Paramanandam, Puna Brahman Sanatan. It's a land of friendship. Friendship, of course, extends throughout the entirety of Braj. And when I speak of the entirety, I speak of the aesthetic possibilities. So it touches the Dasya Rasa, it touches Madhurya, Vatsalya Rasa, and it interacts significantly with Madhurya Rasa as well. So anyway, Raj Parikshit, with his eagerness, asks to hear about Krishna, and also enthusiastically wants to hear about the exploits of Balaram. Then as the canto proceeds, then of course, in the second chapter of the 10th canto, Parikshit Maharaj, or Sukadev, I should say, begins to describe the circumstance of Balaram and Krishna. Kamsa, as you know, was ruling in Mathura, and his rule was cruel. And as the Bhagavatam describes at the beginning of the second chapter of the 10th canto, this caused many of the Yadus to disperse from Mathura, to go to other places, to get away from the cruel regime of Kamsa. But some members of the Kuru dynasty, they stayed on. Not only did they stay on in Mathura, but they even participated in the government of Kamsa, like Akrura, for example. Of course, Devaki and Vasudeva were there by force, imprisoned and so forth. But while it would seem ostensibly that those who stayed, rather than resisting Kamsa at least by way of leaving, were lesser in stature in terms of their piety, but actually quite the opposite is the case. They stayed because of the prophecy that the child of Devaki would bring about the demise of Kamsa. They stayed for the appearance of Krishna, despite the difficulty of living directly under the cruel rule of Kamsa. So they were this is Rag. They despite difficulty, that difficulty was turned into something favorable in their minds, and was thus tolerable. Favorable being that Krishna and Balaram were due to appear in the vicinity, if you will. Parikshit Maharaj, of course, is in Dasya Bhakti. He's an eternal resident of Dwarka, but he's interested also, as everybody in Dwarka is, in the Braj Leela. They know the devotees there are very special, that they please Krishna in a way that the Yadus in Dwarka are not able to do. They're awed by them. So from there, then, of course, the circumstances being described, and that including the fact that Kamsa has begun to kill the children of Devaki, six children, and we come to the point in which the Bhagavatam says, what Saptamo Vaishnavam Dhamam Yam Anantam, that the Saptamo, the seventh child of Devaki, appeared in her womb, and he's Vaishnavam Dhamam Yam Anantam. He is Ananta, and he is a manifestation of or he is one with the Vaishnav Dham, which means Vaikuntaloka, the abode, the Dham, the abode of Vishnu. Balaram, Ananta, his expansion, is considered to be an essential aspect of the Swarup Shakti. So the forms of the devotees are arising out of this aspect of the Swarup Shakti, the Dham itself, and by extension, through the expansions of Balaram and the avatars, Mahavishnu, the material worlds are manifest. So he's a big fellow, as it's mentioned at the conclusion of the slaying of Dhenukasura, who's so central to Balaram's identity. The slaying of Dhenukasura is central to the identity of Balaram arising in fullness in the Bhagavatam. Maybe we'll come to that as we go forward. But there at that point, then it's described that by Sukadeva. Well, what he did in slaying the Dhenukasura was not something very wonderful, really. It's wonderful if we look at him from the human perspective, which to a large extent, of course, is the perspective of the devotees, because he's human-like, and his Aishvarya, his majesty, and so forth, is secondary to the Madhurya, to the sweetness of his human-like nature, Krishna and Balaram, both. So the fact that he could slay Dhenukasura is maybe wonderful from that Madhurya perspective, but looking at it more broadly, he says there that, like when you weave, there's some of the yarn goes up and some goes sideways. He is like this, like a web that contains all the worlds. So Vaishnavam, Dhamam, Yad, Yam Anantam. Bhagavatam. These are the beginning descriptions in the 10th canto of Balaram. The request for such in earnestness on the part of Parikshit Maharaj, and Sukadeva responding with the beginning story. Now, of course, it's interesting to note that Balaram has been fathered by Vasudeva. He's appearing in the womb of Devaki, but at a certain point, Krishna told, who hadn't appeared yet, but informed his internal Shakti Yoga Maya to transfer Balaram, or Ananta, the Amsa of Balaram, partial expansion of Balaram, to the womb, from the womb of Devaki to the womb of Rohini. Bhagavatam says, Devakya jatare garbham seshakyam dhamamamakam. So from Devaki's womb, take seshakyam dhamamamakam, my dham, and place him into the womb of Rohini. So why did two questions arise? Why did Balaram in the form of Ananta, his expansion, appear in the first place in the womb of Devaki. And then why was he transferred? So, of course, the idea that he is the presiding deity over the Dham, and in effect is the Dham, answers the first question, that he appeared as Balaram does in the form of his expansion, as the bedstead of Krishna, as his couch, lying as Ananta does, with Vishnu as a great serpent riding upon him, and so forth. So he prepared the ground, if you will, within the womb of Devaki for the appearance of Krishna. First his Dham manifests, then he makes his appearance. So for that reason, he entered the womb. Now, why was he transferred? Well, 6 sons had been killed previously, and they have a certain history of having been offenders and to Brahma, and as such, having to suffer the plight of the curse of I get it was Hiranyakasipu. They'd be slayed by their own father. It's a complicated history and so forth. Now the Lord himself is appearing in the womb of Devaki. So perhaps we would think, well, he should be transferred so that he's protected from Kamsa, but that doesn't make any sense. He doesn't need to be protected from Kamsa. There's certainly no fear of Kamsa. Says my internet's unstable here. Let me see.
Yeah, you're lagging a little bit.
Ooh. Well,
It's just
I don't know.
periodically.
I don't know what to do about
Not
that.
all the time. Yeah.
Say something if I do. So it's not unless I get a notice on here. I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's not like major. It's just kind of like, it's just a little bit like at certain points.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like we're not missing a whole sentence or something.
Okay. So at any rate, the reason that he took birth or appeared in the womb of Devaki first is, of course, to prepare the ground, if you will, for Krishna's appearance in Devaki, or the appearance of Devaki Nandan Krishna in the womb. But then the second question comes, why was he transferred? Right? Why was he there in the first place? And why was he transferred? Well, he wasn't transferred because out of fear of Kamsa. Sanatana Goswami gives a nice answer to this question in his commentary. He says that Krishna asked Yogamaya to transfer him to the womb of Rohini, who is the original, if you will, mother of Balaram. So the Ananta expansion of Balaram from the womb of Devaki was transferred to the womb of Rohini and merged with his source, Balaram, and the full Vaibhav Prakash of Braj, Balaram himself there, of course, issued forth, if you will, from the womb of Rohini in Braj. Why he was transferred, Sanatana Goswami says, and Jiva Goswami agrees, of course, is because Krishna felt that if Balaram was not in Braj, his pastimes would not be joyful. That's a beautiful point. Krishna feels without Balaram's presence in Braj, well, he can't be happy there. Balaram had a similar experience when he returned to Braj from Dwarka at Krishna's well, with Krishna's blessing, was his own desire to do so, to pacify the inhabitants. But when there, meeting with his friends and preparing while he was there to herd cows, as they would daily, he would lose interest. Without Krishna there in Braj, Balaram couldn't be happy. Similarly, this is the reverse. Without Balaram in Braj, Krishna cannot be happy. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of Balaram if we want to make Krishna happy. So Rohini, of course, is an important figure. She was a wife of Vasudeva. She was sent to Braj to be protected in the mind of Vasudeva. That was wise. But the connection of Rohini and Balaram, by extension, with the Yadus and with the Kshatriya class affords a little bit of supporting emphasis, or evidence, I should say, evidence to the rumor in Braj that sometimes surfaces regarding both Rohini and Balaram. They're not really Brajbasis. They're from Mathura. They hear this sometimes, or these facts surface to give some support to that idea, but that idea is never given any credence by the inhabitants of Braj, who see them, and rightfully so, Rohini and Balaram, as full members of the Brajbasi community, despite their Kshatriya background. So in substance, Rohini and certainly Balaram are Brajbasis. Again, this is another important, this is the same point I brought up earlier with regard to Parikshit being concerned about, I'm a member of the Kuru dynasty, Krishna was born in the Yadu dynasty, Joshi was born in my dynasty. Well, it's not a question of where you're born, it's a question of consciousness. And he's closer in consciousness to the Kurus and to Arjun than he is to the Yadus. And you're the grandson of Arjun. See how auspicious your position is. So similarly, they're Kshatriyas, they're from Mathura, but that's a fact. But for the Brajbasi's mind, it has no bearing whatsoever. They recognize that, they acknowledge that, but not in a way that in any way would cause them to think that Rohini or Balaram weren't one of them, as some outsiders might think. I mean, there's a rumor about Krishna also that actually he's actually the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, but there's not as much evidence to support that. Here, there's a little bit of more, evidence. Rohini is the wife of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the father of Krishna. Vasudeva is a Kshatriya. Rohini is a Kshatriya. Balaram's a Kshatriya, but they're not treated like this. It's acknowledged. They're treated to some extent. Let's talk about Rohini. So it's an important figure. The point I'm making here is, what does it mean to be a Brajbasi then? When I remember going to Radhakund one time and being accosted by one of the Pandyas, one of the fellows who leads people around to show them this is what happened here, this is what happened there, in Gaur Leela and Krishna Leela and so forth. And, they do that for a living. Not a bad thing. But this fellow's insistence was that I'm Brajbasi, therefore you should worship me and pay me something to tell you these things. He quoted the verse uh, um, from Gaudiya text, I forget what it was, saying something similar about the Brajbasis, they were worshipable, and so maybe something from Raghunath Das Swami. I replied by citing Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam, Trinadapi, Sanichana. This is what is a Vaishnav? I happen to have a disciple who was from the area, so I said, "This is my tour guide here." But here was a fellow living in Braj, but he didn't have the consciousness of Braj. Is the point? So it's not a geographical realm. It's geographical metrics, if you will, length and width and so forth, are described only in the context of the Leela. Outside of that, it's not a limited geographical area. It is a subjective realm of consciousness. So therein we find the birth of Balaram from Mother Rohini, and so something about her, because naturally the son is going to have some of the characteristics of the mother as well. She is about maybe more than a decade, maybe 12 years younger than Yashoda, yet given the fact that she's from the royalty, a Kshatriya. So again, doesn't distance her in any way, but Mother Yashoda treats her with some respect, like an older sister, which doesn't get any traction, if you will, with Rohini, make her proud or feel that she's in any way superior, but formally, a little bit respect is given. Others call her, address her as the princess, and no one in Braj can ignore her request. So there is a little bit treating her like a Kshatriya on the surface, if you will, but not in such a way as to think that she is not somehow not a member of the community. So given her position like this, in the way Yashoda treats her, the way Nanda Maharaj treats her, all the gopas and the young gopis, they always listen whenever she speaks. She never orders any of them to do anything, but she very carefully explains different tasks that need to be accomplished. She's the main manager at Nandagram. She's the main cook at Nandagram. She organizes for the guests when they arrive, for example. She sends gifts out to those who have visited, or on the holidays, the days celebrating auspicious moments in their lives. She arranges for sending note cards to them, like once one would send a Christmas card or something like that. And again, all the gopas and gopis, they listen to her very carefully. Krishna doesn't listen to Mother Yashoda. Krishna doesn't listen to Nanda Maharaj, but he listens to Rohini, and by extension, he listened to Balaram. Therefore, repeatedly, Yashoda will try to get Balaram to express her desire to Krishna, that he might change his behavior or address something about his behavior. So again, like mother to some extent, like son, gopis, they regularly approach Rohini, whisper in her ears about how Krishna has been teasing them and so forth, and then she works with them and gives them some strategy to work through it, turn it back on Krishna and so forth. Gopas will also, young cowherds will also complain, as they do to Balaram at times, about Krishna. They will to Rohini, and she has a close connection with those gopas. So they share secrets with her that they don't share even with their own parents or with Nanda and Yasoda. So she is tuned in a little bit more to the forest adventures of the cowherd boys. And so she knows, for example, what forests at least are planned to be visited today, while others may be visited as the plan changes on the fly, if you will, in their sportive cowherding leelas throughout the day. Usually some plan is made and it's shared to some extent with Rohini, who then engages the cowherds with regard to her own service of cooking. Okay, you're going to such and such forest. Be sure to bring back fruits that we know that certain fruits are abundant in that forest. Bring some back for the cooking and so forth. So she'll engage them in that way. Cowherd boys will complain about Krishna, as I said earlier, as they do to Balaram also. For example, they'll complain, some cow will complain, Krishna has taken my chudder and given it to a bear today. No explanation. So they go to Rohini. That boy goes to Rohini and says, well, what's happening with this? So she says, well, she'll explain to him. It must have been that bear just had babies and felt she needed a blanket to cover them. So Krishna gave your chudder. And then the boy will think, yes, and my chudder was bigger than Krishna's. That's why he chose it. Oh, and he feels good about it and so forth. Or, Krishna took some food from my tiffin and gave it to the monkeys. Well, Rohini knows Krishna would not let any of his friends go hungry. So she says, but did you go hungry? No. Krishna gave me from his tiffin then. Okay. So in this way, she has a very close relationship with the young gopis and the young gopas that exceeds kind of in intimacy as to their intrigues and so forth, that of Yashoda. It's important for us, I think, to know about these important figures in Braj, like Rohini, as we're describing today. It's just a thought just came to me. I remember that hearing years ago Pujapad Sridhar speak about Mirabai, who was a famous poet and lover of Krishna, but in her poems, she only speaks about Krishna and herself without speaking about glorifying, praising, expressing feeling for Nanda, Yashoda, Sridham, Rohini, Balaram, Radha, and so forth, without which the fullness of what we know to be Krishna, Swayam Bhagavan, is not present, is not possible. Whereas in the Gaudiya prayers, we find always glorification of various members of Braj. They're all part of the composite. We have to, the object of love is there, but the love must be there. Yan mitram sanatanam. So these are eternal, essential figures that are one with what we call Krishna and Balaram, one and different at the same time. And Krishna and Balaram, to go in that direction for a moment, are thought to be ontologically one, even though they have different dispositions. I was describing a little bit Rohini's disposition. So Balaram similar in some respects. He'll counsel boys. He'll pacify two gopas arguing over something. He's comparatively to Krishna, he's more well behaved, and and so on. But before going into the difference between them emotionally, it's important to note that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, our founding acharyas, also for important reasons emphasize the oneness between Krishna and Balaram. It's similar to the way in which we find Chaitanya Mahaprabhu repeatedly instructing his devotees as to the importance of Nityananda Ram, and how if you don't love Nityananda Prabhu, you don't love me, so to speak. I mean, repeatedly in the Leela, in Gaur Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu points out the divinity, if you will, of Nityananda Ram, distinguishing him from others in that way, as he himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was distinguished from others in their minds. So similarly, our Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas have emphasized the oneness between Krishna and Balaram, as Krishna himself does in the Bhagavatam, in the 15th chapter, the 10th canto, which is the Dhenukasura Leela. So much is packed into that. Again, this is where Balaram comes out, so to speak, with the beginning of the Poganda age. Balaram significance starts to play more substantially into the Leela. But at the onset of that, Krishna eulogizes Balaram. He does it, of course, in humor, in one sense, because he's speaking about himself and projecting it on Balaram, but truth is said in jest. So Balaram, Krishna is pointing out to all the cowherds and to all of us, all the readers of the Bhagavatam, the importance of Balaram. And one of the reasons for this, of course, is that some texts, some Vaishnava sects, interpretation of those texts leads one to believe that Balaram is not as important as he is, even that he's a jiva, some schools seem to think, or that he's an incarnation or expansion of Ananta Sage rather than the other way around, and so forth. So our Gaudiya acharyas are following, if you will, the lead of Krishna, really, in glorifying Balaram, as he does in that eulogy that begins the Dhenukasura Leela chapter. Jiva Goswami uses the term samaprakashatvam. Samaprakashatvam. These two are equal manifestations. Again, Balaram is not an avatar of Narayan. He precedes Narayan, so to speak. The first and immediate expansion of Krishna, and again, personifying friendliness and humor. He presides Balaram over Hasirasa. Jiva Goswami, underscoring this point, in the Krishna Sandarbha, he brings up a couple of points to scriptural references, I should say, to substantiate his point as to the ontological oneness between Krishna and Balaram. And it's a little bit more than just, Vishnu Tattva are all one. That he wants to include him in Vishnu Tattva. Because, of course, again, because it's a little deceiving, because he is Vishnu Tattva, ontologically, but he is in a mood of a servant. So there's Sevya Bhagavan and Sevaka. So there's Bhagavan who's served and Bhagavan who's the servitor. So he acts like a Shakti, in one sense, in his mood of service to Krishna. At the same time, he's object of love along with Krishna for the Gaudiyas, and particularly for those in Sakirasa. But to cite some of the evidences from scripture that Jiva Goswami draws upon to make his point as to the oneness of Krishna and Balaram, I think he begins with reference to the Gita. In the Gita, in the 10th chapter, Krishna is speaking about vibhutis, powerful manifestations within nature, or within the world, if you will, that are that he says I can be identified with. So there are powerful manifestations of nature that give us in a kind of a shift our consciousness by their power, by their force, from the consciousness of inadvertently just thinking we're the center, the things are evolving around us, to the obvious fact that they're not revolving around us. We stand here, for example, in Northern California, next to the big redwood trees that you could build a house in, drive a car through, and so forth. And you just don't feel like in a forest like that, you don't feel like you're the center anymore. Or just a few miles from here is the coast, and it's fantastic cliffs down into the ocean and its vastness and so forth. So these manifestations of nature that are very powerful, they have the power to give us momentarily an epiphany that I'm not the center, shift the balance of our consciousness to a more correct position, if you will. Sometimes people in the scientific community say, yeah, I've been in the mountaintop. I've had that, that shift, that experience. That's what people are talking about when they talk about God. Of course, this is just the beginning idea, but speak of Bhakti Rasa, that's a whole other thing in terms of experience of the Godhead. That's not the whole of the experience of Godhead, just to experience some powerful manifestation of nature that causes that kind of shift momentarily. But anyway, in that chapter, it's not only powerful manifestations of nature, but Balaram is mentioned also. And Krishna says that he's one with him. He says what does he say? He says of Vrishnis, what is the verse? Vrishninam Vasudevo Smi, 10th chapter, I should say, of the Bhagavad Gita. Vrishninam means the Yadus, Vasudevo Smi. Among the Vrishnis, I am Vasudev. So this is a reference to Balaram, who is the son of Vasudev. You can also say that Krishna, as the son of Devaki, that manifestation of Krishna is Vasudev. But Jiva Goswami makes the point that he's not saying I am who I am. It's obvious that Krishna is in Dwarka is Krishna in Vrindavan. So he's not saying that. He's saying that Balaram, who's also considered Vasudeva as the son of Vasudeva, he and I are one. Vrishninam Vasudevosmi. Jiva Goswami then goes on to cite a number of verses that are all building up, if you will, through the Kumar Lila to the Poganda Lila, in which Krishna and Balaram are described by the dual case, without even mentioning their names, the pair, together. He says, in spirit, what the Bhagavatam is saying, for all intents and purposes, is that these two are one. They are virtually twins, identical twins. They are the Yugal, as Nayananda Thakur said, of the Yugal Kishore of Sakiras. And in a very kind of sweet way, then Jiva Goswami concludes his evidence for the ontological oneness between Krishna and Balaram, that Balaram will be equally worshipable is the idea. This is important for the sadhakas, for the jivas of this world, to understand the significance of Balaram. Misunderstanding that is like misunderstanding the Guru Tattva, and everything is lost there. He's the Akanda Guru Tattva. So this Guru Tattva is that manifestation of divinity that is best equipped and most suited to help us, assist us, to serve us on our journey to Prem. When that's misunderstood, when we become guru fanatics, for example, without understanding the tattva, when we can't recognize our guru beyond certain characteristics that we become acquainted with in terms of his person, we can't hear somewhere else from outside of his mouth, lotus mouth, or hers, something that we know is non-different, although coming from another place. This is it's all right and important and essential to have a Kanishta Adhikari conception of the Guru. We have to start somewhere, but we can't stay there forever. And so this is a challenge. We need good guidance for that. But point being here, misunderstanding this, and I'm comparing it to misunderstanding Balaram, I think appropriately so. This is certainly arguably the greatest impediment to our progress. If we misunderstand that, misapply that which is meant to be intended to be the principal instrument to liberate us, becomes the cause of our bondage, especially with this Guru Tattva. We don't understand this properly, then in the name of and with all appearance of serving the Guru and so forth, we do ourselves a disjustice, an injustice. We bind ourselves that much more, arguably, than we were previously, without the guidance. So in a similar way, and by extension, it's important for us to understand the divinity of Balaram. He is the Dham. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami got permission to go to the Dham, as he explains himself, from Nityananda Prabhu, Nityananda Ram. Nityananda appeared to him in a dream along with his cowherd associates, all dressed as Balaram and his friends. And he said, go to Vrindavan. He was homeless. He had rejected his brother and left home, Krishnadas Kaviraj, because in the house he felt there was an offensive attitude towards Nityananda Ram, who's Balaram. And Balaram came to him. Nityananda Ram, Balaram came to him and said, you're homeless. You live with me in Braj. What is it? Arko Binitai Chand. Sangsara Vasanamor Kabetucha. You want to overcome samsara and enter the Dham, you have to have regard for Balaram. There's no rasa whatsoever that will be attained without proper understanding of Balaram. So it's an important point that's emphasized by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And as I say, coming to this point, Jiva Goswami concludes his evidence. He gives other evidences that I haven't cited. I'm just as we go forward, remembering some of the things he said. But he points out that throughout the discussions, Krishna and Balaram, the dual cases used, as I said, they're considered as twins. And when we get to, I believe it's the 38th chapter of the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, then the final evidence in Jiva Goswami's mind comes in a very sweet way. What is that? That their footprints are described. And on them are the marks of the flag, the thunderbolt, the goad, the lotus. Their feet are the same, their footprints are the same. And these footprints are different from any other, even ordinary person, obviously, would speak of, any avatar would speak of ordinary persons. So these two great beings, Krishna and Balaram, with their auspicious and gracious smiling glances of benediction, Bhagavatam says, they beautified the land of Braj by their feet. bearing the marks of the flag and the thunderbolts and the gold and the lotus and so on. So, so they're one, ontologically one. The important point. My mind goes a bit to Chaitanya Bhagavat, where in this discussion, where Vrindavan Das tries to do the same thing. At the very onset of his book, he says, okay, everyone thinks that Krishna is God because he had a Rasa Leela. And that's the Maharas. That's the fullest expression of Rasa. Therefore, he is Bhagavan. True. But he says, but Balaram also had a Rasa Leela. Of course, you look at it carefully, they're not the same by any measure. But in order just to make the point in the minds of readers in general, as to the fact that Balaram is equally divine, he is Bhagavan, disguised even as a servitor of Bhagavan, but he is Bhagavan showing the way. He also sought to emphasize this point. So it's consistent throughout. We find it in Chaitanya Charitamrita. All the original verses of Sanskrit verses, 5 of them, of Krishnadas Kaviraj about Nityananda Prabhu, and describing this as one with Balaram, that he might not be misunderstood. But again, they're one, but they're also different in emotional component, emotional makeup. I wrote a little poem about Balaram. I'll read it to you. This is describing him for a moment. Balaram's beauty knows no bounds. His feet are soft like lotuses. His hands, the hands of his long, strong arms reach his knees. His broad chest is garlanded with the gunjamala, and his dark hair is tied with a top knot, circled with a bounty of forest flowers. His complexion is clear and white, like reflective moonlight. He is Bhagavan, of friendly frame of mind. He sometimes serves, while at other times he is concerned with how his younger brother behaves. Sages call him Baladeva, mighty, witty, wise and well-dressed in midnight blue. He bears a tilak made of musk, dark in hue. His single earring kisses his cheek, and a lotus circled by bees decorates his ear. O Balaram, a voice deep in tone, when will I hear your call to serve, the sound of your buffalo horn? Balaram Ji Ki Jai. Of course, Balaram also has a flute. He also plays a flute like Krishna does. Many other cowherds all have flutes and play, but nobody can play the flute like Krishna. He's Venu Madhurya. He puts everyone in a trance by his flute playing, and Balaram is more characterized by his buffalo or antelope horn, by which he wakes everyone up to the service of Krishna, especially his friends, every morning. Krishna puts them out, knocks them out, and Krishna and Balaram wakes them up. So that said, we'll turn for a moment then as we conclude our discussion. We've gone a little over time already to the 15th chapter, where I have said repeatedly through this discussion that of the 10th canto that Balaram comes out and starts to become prominent. This is in connection with the Poganda Leela that is central to Sakyarasa. And to date, in terms of the narrative in the Bhagavatam, Balaram has, despite his Kshatriya lineage, despite his being the elder brother, despite everything that Yashoda says about him, being the older brother and taking care of the younger brother Krishna. He hasn't done anything in the eyes of the other cowherd boys that necessarily warrant that, compared to Krishna, who has killed other demons already, quite a number of them. So with the beginning of the Pagandalila, they call him out to deliver the tall palms, the tall fruits from Denikasur and his henchmen, his associates. There's a very subtle and sweet extra reason for why these cowherds, although they approach Krishna and Balaram to deliver the fruits and the tall trees from the cruel rule, if you will, of Denikasur, that wouldn't let anybody taste them and come in the vicinity of Talvan, which is according to the Puranas, a very, very pleasant place. It's very expansive, flat, smooth. The earth is black, covered with darba and kusha grass, and it's devoid of stones and pebbles. It goes on and on about it. Very beautiful place. It borders the western shore of the Jamuna, about, geographically speaking, about 8 miles southwest of Mathura, between the metropolis of Mathura and Mount Govardhan, a very desirable place. And they're the tall fruits. They're very desirable. A certain type of palm tree with fruits that if you let them sit for a couple of days, they become an intoxicant, intoxicating beverage. Tall palms. So why they approach Krishna and Balaram to they could, this is during the I believe during the monsoon, then they could smell the redolent scent of the tall palms, so bringing the situation to their attention, they bring it to the attention of Krishna and Balaram, but their emphasis is on approaching Balaram first, and of course they want to bring out his heroism and so on and so forth, which is and Udipana for Sakyaras itself, the heroics of Krishna and Balaram, heroics that Balaram has not yet displayed compared to Krishna, although he's been, as I say, given credit for being the older brother and more powerful and protector and so on and so forth. But besides taking the opportunity now at the beginning of the Pagandalila to bring this out, there's another subtle and sweet reason that speaks to us something about the nature of Balaram. Reason why the boys approach him first, call him out first, and indicate he should lead the way. He should slay Denikasur. He should free the fruits. And that is because what? If any boy, coward boy, should ask Krishna to get them that fruit, can you give me that fruit from that tree? Krishna might do it, or Krishna might not do it. Krishna might think, it's not ripe, I won't get it. Or Krishna might get it, give it to him, then steal it from him and turn it into a keep away match and so forth. Krishna's a little unpredictable. Balaram's a little bit more predictable and can be overtly, if you will, relied upon. Obviously, Krishna can be relied upon ultimately, but overtly in the context of the Leela, he's more predictable and reliable in a sense. And that is with regard to his friendship. Krishna can act in a way in which, you might, he stole that from you. You might think he's not my friend. Therefore, we got to go complain to Balaram. We have to go complain of Rohini, as I mentioned earlier. But Balaram is more overtly a reliable friend, if you will. So, point being is, if a coward boy should ask Balaram, get me that fruit, Balaram will get the fruit. No questions asked. He has long arms, we heard, standing down to his knees, you reach, grab the fruit, climb the tree for the fruit, or no matter how stout the fruit tree is, he'll shake the trunk until that fruit drops, and just to extend the spirit and nature of his friendship and reliability, if you will, in this regard. If still the fruit doesn't come down, he'll uproot the tree to bring that one fruit to that boy. And whatever the boy does with it doesn't matter. If he takes the fruit, then gives it to somebody else, or he eats it and says, oh, it's not sweet, and just discards it, or decides to use it in a game rather than eat it, that's of no consequence to Balaram. His friend wanted a fruit, he asked for it, he's going to do it. Now, if the boy takes the fruit that Balaram secured for him and then decides to give it to Krishna, then Balaram will go and be concerned. Then he'll take the fruit. Because Balaram thinks, and rightfully so, with regard to those who give things to Krishna, his friends, they give them in love. And Krishna does not know whether the things themselves are good or bad, whether the fruit's ripe or not, for example. He doesn't know. He only knows their love. So Balaram, if the boy wants to give that fruit to Krishna, then he'll take it and inspect it first and see, above and beyond the love with which it's being offered, whether it's worthy of being offered. So this is a little bit about Balaram, the nature of his friendship. And so another thing, so the boys call on him first. Now, of course, they're going to cause him to become angry with Dhenukasura as they report to him the situation. They want the fruits, but there are extenuating circumstances, and that is, they want him to slay Dhenukasura. So they're going to bring out his anger, but anger is not something that's common for Balaram. It's very difficult to make him angry. That said, if he should think, this is his nature, even for a moment, that someone from outside has harmed even one hair on the head of one cowherd, his eye will turn red and burn like a laser, Bitcoin glance, fire. To use a modern term, in rage, with the desire to address that offender. So such is his kind of, if you will, a reliable friendship. He's very sober, but then again, there's a relaxed side to him that lends to drinking that fermented tall fruit juice. Prabhupada describes in his Nectar Devotion that there's different ways in which people respond to intoxication. I think it gives 3 ways, and the way in which Balaram responds to it, that is acceptable and respectable. So overall, he's quite sober, but he has this penchant for particularly the tall fruit, and therefore, out of this Dhenukasura Leela, of course, where he ultimately slays Dhenukasura and the fruits are liberated and whatnot, Balaram goes on into the Mathura and Dwarka Leela to, along with Krishna, lead a princely Leela, and there on his chariot, he has a flag, and it is the tall fruit. So the Dhenukasura Leela very central to bringing out something about the nature of Balaram, both his divinity and his emotional disposition, and so forth. Let me. We've gone quite a bit over time, so let me conclude with this. The boys have sought to pinch the nerve, if you will, of his ego. You're a Kshatriya. They're implying you have long, powerful arms, Ram Rama, Mahabaho, they say, but you haven't done anything that would serve as evidence to your heroic nature, strength, power, and so forth. They challenge him, if you will, in the spirit of Vira Rasa, in play. This is very prominent within Sakyarasa. Bhagavatam says, I'll read a verse. Therein, they say, so many fruits have already fallen on the ground. So ripe is the orchard, and many more fruits are falling by the day. But alas, they're guarded by that Duratma Denuka. O Balaram, so they address him first for reasons I've mentioned. O Krishna, this Asura is an ass, but a very strong one, surrounded by many kinsmen, all of equal strength. Hearing this, Krishna laughs at his friends' Vaishya humor. He notes that the boys were not afraid of Denuka. And meanwhile, Balaram expresses, they draw the anger, he expresses righteous Kshatriya anger. And so the boys continue. I'll read my own description of what their conversation, how it goes. No one goes to Taliban, neither humans nor herds of cows, being terrified by this man-eating mule. Indeed, even birds avoid him overhead. Yes, such fragrant fruits, never before eaten, are found there. Their sweet smell is so strong it overwhelms us, even here at this very moment. O Krishna, get those fruits for us. Our minds are disturbed by their scent. O Balaram, our desire is great, and surely Krishna will be pleased if you lead the way. Let us go there. Krishna responds, laughing, from where have all you boys gotten this greed? Sri Ram replies, by association with a greedy butter thief. Ram says, well, greedy fellows, my friends, you are our equals. For sometimes you display your valor, moving your eyebrows and challenging us to a fight, and then you defeat us. So surely you don't need us to fend for you. Sri Ram says, but you two are princes. Krishna, the son of the coward king, and you a Kshatriya in our midst. So yeah, we're all equals. That's true. But still, within the context of that, Krishna is the son of the king Nanda, king of all those cowards. So he has a special place, and you're a Kshatriya. So you graciously treat us as equals, and we act as such amongst ourselves. But despite our internal sportive play, as a group, we are one, a unit, moving through the forest together. And in this respect, you are our leaders, group leaders. Surely we shall go to Taliban, but should you not be pleased to lead us there? Krishna, laughing, says, all right then, I've already destroyed many asuras, but Balaram has not dealt with even one. He should lead the way, as you say, and slay Denuka, who, because he is only a mule, is not much of a challenge anyway. He's digging in here to pinch the ego of Balaram. Ram says, Well, my dear brother, you have been blessed with a way of saying things by which those things are accomplished, but let us leave the cows behind. And so they proceed. Thus, sharing laughter, Krishna, dark as the all-consuming night sky, followed the moon-like Balaram, along with the multitude of shooting star-like sakas, who leapt and cried out, making sounds like threatening meteors, announcing their descent on Talavan, where, of course, Balaram prevailed and showed the way, liberating the fruits. Balaram Ji ki jai, Shri Baladeva Purnima ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. So, a few thoughts today. Any questions or comments? I'll go to the chat. Anything in the chat? Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, Eric just texted me and he told me that he has a question.
Okay.
Do you want to unmute Eric?
Morning, Maharaj.
Morning.
So I was just wondering, one question that I had was, with Balaram often being described as being the origin of Guru Tattva or Adi Guru and such, are there like any particular leelas that could maybe touch upon that kind of accentuate this aspect of his character?
As Guru?
Yes.
Well, in Balaram's rasic makeup is called Sankul. That means he's in Sakirasa, but packaged along with the Sakirasa is Dasya and Vatsalya, all three of which, Sakya, Dasya, and Vatsalya, he presides over in Braj. They are called Sambandha Rupa, as opposed to the Kama Rupa of Madhurya Rasa. And so he's considered to be primarily in Sakirasa because it's the dominant of the three influences. But we do find instances in which Balaram, expressing the Vatsalya component of his Sankul Bhav, takes the position of like the Guru of Krishna and is served by Krishna. And Krishna brings him to the attention of others that he should be served and so forth. So there are some examples like that in the Braj Leela narrative of Sukadev. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
And Mohini has a question.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for the talk. So my question is, you mentioned a little bit about that anger of Lord Balaram. And sometimes I've thought about this. Sometimes in Krishna book, there's a few examples of how Balaram's anger sometimes comes like a wave, like for example, like when he dragged the Yamuna or when he clubbed Rukmi. And I sometimes think about it in contrast to when Krishna never seems to have that kind of wave of anger. And I wondered whether first if you had any thoughts on that, but also in comparison to when Balaram comes as Nityananda Ram, and in comparison to he's akrodha, he's never angry. So I just find it quite interesting to think about. I wonder if there was anything that you could say about that. And is that anger to do with that Kshatriya nature that you were speaking about? Or?
Well, it's not that Krishna doesn't express anger at times. Of course, you find this in the Mathura and Dwarka Leela. And he slays different demons there and so on and so forth. And that's more of a Kshatriya Leela also. But Krishna becomes angry with Balaram for telling on him that he ate dirt, for example. But with regard to Balaram's anger, it's hard to anger him. But when he gets angry, it's very powerful. But he tends very much to lament afterwards for having shown anger, even in killing demons and so forth. He feels bad about it. Such is his nature. So in that sense, there are instances in which he expresses anger, but he doesn't get kind of overtaken by it, but he kind of takes responsibility for it, if you will. It feels a little bit bad about it, a little ashamed about it, and then it requires Krishna to cheer him up, say it's okay. It was warranted. It was warranted. So even in the expression of his anger, when it's fully played out, he doesn't identify with it entirely. So when he comes as Nityananda Ram, then we don't find him being angry, right? Yeah. So something like that. Hope that helps.
Thank you.
What else?
Sharda has a question, and that's in the chat.
She says, can Raksha Bandhan be celebrated amongst God's siblings? Yes, of course. That's important. You tie the bond with your brothers. This is very prominent in Braj. And so yes, that's a simple answer. What else? Anyway, yeah, we've gone a little over time, so I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you on this occasion, and I guess we'll get together again soon for there's Janmashtami and Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja and Radhastami. So many festive days coming in the weeks ahead. Shri Baladeva Purnima ki jai.
Jai
Krishna
Balaram.
Balaram ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Bol.
Thank you for that really beautiful class.
Okay.
Lot to think about. Alrighty, so I will just announce the classes. Well, I guess things are going to be a little bit different. So the 30th, that's a Monday, yeah? Wait, so I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit confused about, okay, so the classes, so the classes will continue this week. So I guess on Monday, the 30th, next Monday, and the next Tuesday, we'll have classes from Gurudev. But so on Monday, like for this week coming up, from what I'm understanding, let me check the chat to make sure no one's corrected me. Okay, no one's corrected me. Padmanabha Swami is giving classes on Brahma Gita, the Song of the Bumblebee. And then on Tuesday, Shama Sundar is giving classes on the importance of prayer and the importance and implications of prayer. And then on Wednesdays, Dulal is giving his classes on Krishna Sandarbha. And then on Thursday, Archana is doing her interviews, the beauty and messiness of a sadhaka's journey. And then on Friday, Brigupad is giving class Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, an overview for devotees. And then on Saturdays, Kanu Ram is giving class the Masters, the Gurus of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, are we having a Q&A on Sunday? That's okay. I also had that question, Krishangi. I don't know. If Archana's here, she could answer that question for me. For anyone who knows, what if she just already left? I think she already left. I will check on that. I'll text her or something, and then maybe I can make an announcement on Facebook, and maybe they could send out something in the email. My guess is going to be no, because Gurudev's already going to be giving some classes, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I'm going to check. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Haribo.